Sure. Michigan has been going through difficulties with the automobile industry now for 30 years. I lost my job twice in '75 and again in '79 in the first oil and gas crises that took place.
And what were you doing with Ford?
At that time, I was working on the line at Chicago Assembly Plant. The first time. The second time I lost my job, I was on the line at General Motors in '78. So the second time I lost my job is when I went back to school, and then I was lucky and got back into Ford as an engineer. But overall, the employment here has been dropping and dropping. And the idea that about these jobs, I mean, let's say one thing is it's very hard to work in a factory. That's the reason the UAW won 30 and out. You are exhausted after working in a factory 10, 12 hours a day for 30 years. So let's give respect where it's due. These people have worked in those factories. They have made the billions for these companies that was wasted by bad management, and then later on by the speculators who came in and and did their damage here too. So I think you have to be clear about who we're talking about here. And as far as education goes, people are leaving Michigan. We're one of the two states that are actually suffering a decrease in population. So people get degrees and they leave Michigan. So that's another thing that needs to be said about what's happening here. But I guess and we have, and the devastation in Detroit, one of the people who's on the street seems to know about that. As you maybe remember, we had 45,000 people get their water cut off by the publicly owned waterworks in Detroit.
That's right.
In a given year. So, we have poverty rate in Detroit as of 2007, before this downturn, was over 33%. So we have, and that's a pocket of poverty in Detroit, in Flint, where Michael Moore talks about Flint, in Saginaw, all these pockets of essentially black cities where there are high levels of poverty. There's no plan that I can see that's going to try to alleviate that poverty at all. And that's the question that I, as a Green and as a Michigan person, really care about. What is our plan for turning this around? I don't see a plan, either in the bankruptcy proceedings with General Motors or in the Obama stimulus package.
Our reporter, Ernie Cruz, has a report. Let's go to that now.
There's going to be a lot of human suffering, and none of it's necessary.
GM dealers are furious that the company will eliminate 2,000 franchisees as part of its bankruptcy agreement with the White House task force.
We are convinced that these dealership cuts are being mandated by the audit task force. There's no question in our mind that that's the case. I don't believe
by the White House.
By the White House.
They extended themselves to take care of the board and management. Can you imagine that? They took tax dollars to help people that ruined the company, and then they're running over small businessmen and putting people out of work.
They blame the White House for the decision, saying it was a precondition for authorizing the automaker's bankruptcy deal.
GM and Chrysler, the management that drove them into bankruptcy, they're the winners because they're going to keep their jobs and they're going to get bonuses.
These dealership closures mean thousands of salespeople, managers, office workers, and mechanics nationwide may lose their jobs.
More than 100,000 people will probably lose their jobs across the country in this. Some people have said as many as 300,000. Depends on how many in each dealership,
Expect losses from many of the companies that do business with dealers, from part suppliers to advertising.
We use all the same things that the manufacturers use. We have to buy from suppliers, too. So the ripple effect is there.
These losses are in addition to the 20,000 jobs that will be lost as GM closes 12 factories. GM is getting rid of its Hummer, Saturn, Saab, and Pontiac brands, some by sale, others by elimination. The automaker is hoping that by focusing on more gas-efficient and higher-quality cars, it may be able to entice Americans to buy American once again. But the wait will be painful, and not just for GM workers. As more and more GM dealerships close, the impact will be felt far beyond the workers in the auto industry, because as these cars go away and these showrooms disappear, this land stops generating tax revenue for state and local governments. And with less money in their budgets, cuts may also be coming for government employees. In Frederick, I'm Ernie Cruz.
It's pretty clear who's losing. But in this transaction, there's also somebody who's winning. Investigative journalist Greg Palast wrote a piece entitled Grand Theft Auto, in which he shares with us a little bit about who's winning. Let's see what he had to write. They may be crying about General Motors' bankruptcy today, but dumping 40,000 of the last 60,000 union jobs into a mass grave won't spoil Jamie Dimon's day. Dimon is the CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase Bank. While GM workers are losing their retirement health benefits, their jobs, their life savings, while shareholders are getting zilch and many creditors getting hosed, a few privileged GM lenders led by Morgan and Citibank expect to get back 100% of their loans to GM, a stunning $6 billion. George, it's clear Citibank and J.P. Morgan are winners. Is this fair?
Well, let's examine what's being said there. They loaned GM money. Most of the people that loan GM money are getting nothing back. The stockholders are getting wiped out. A lot of the employees are losing their jobs. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the dealer thing, because I think that it's crocodile tears as much as anything for them. I mean, the dealership bodies were vastly overextended, and the dealers got franchise laws which essentially prevented any rationalization of their system. So I'm not feeling sorry for the dealers.
Crocodile tears is pretty strong language.
I mean it.
So can you tell us in plain English why you call it crocodile tears?
Well, first of all, GM already has as many dealers as all the imports put together. And the productivity of the GM franchises is a small fraction. In other words, the number of cars sold per franchise, a small fraction of what's sold in the others. So, you know, this is one of the problems with too many brands as well. So there was going to have to be a major reduction in the number of auto dealers. Whatever happened to General Motors?
Well, that might have been a miscalculation on the part of General Motors.
No.
But there is still going to be the extension of pain as these people find themselves laid off and the dealerships closed, right?
The people in the people in dealerships.
Dealerships. These are private-owned companies that have no only relationship to GM is that they give GM money for its cars. I mean, why? Where is
the money to finance the cars?
Where is the precedent to shut down independent businesses connected to a business that's not doing well? I mean, where's the precedent for that? You know of one?
Patrice?
I think that Mr. Eves knows a bit more about this franchising thing, which has prevented GM from, GM shrinking. We're selling 1/3 less cars in the United States today than we did a year ago. All the auto companies are shrinking. Everyone is shrinking, and they have to. But that means the dealers need to shrink too.
And the dealers have been claiming for years that they aren't making any money selling new cars. They're making money selling parts and doing servicing and selling used cars. I mean, if you look at the 4.7 million jobs that people say are related to the auto industry in this country, a very small percentage of those are related to actual building new cars, and particularly of the big three. There's still going to be cars in this country. They're still going to need servicing. They're still going to need fuel. And the skills required for an auto salesperson are not really all that, if you look at the training and all, they're not all that great. So I think they're far more flexible. I'm much more worried and much more sympathetic for the people in the plants.
Okay, we've got to move to our next quote from Greg Palast. In effect, he writes, in effect, the Obama administration is demanding that money for an elderly auto worker's spleen should be siphoned off to feed the TARP babies. Workers go without lung transplants so Diamond and Reuben can pimp out their ride. This is another Guantanamo moment for the Obama administration. How come Citi and Morgan aren't asked, like the workers and other creditors, to take stock in GM? Why is this favoritism being shown to Citibank and JP Morgan? George and then Patrice?